The day of my sister's wedding arrived like a thunderstorm in disguise, glittering and joyful on the surface, but with a weight pressing down on my chest that no one seemed to notice. I had been looking forward to this day for months, imagining smiles, laughter, and a shared family warmth. But as soon as I stepped into the grand hall, festooned with twinkling fairy lights and delicate floral arrangements, a cold realization hit me. I was invisible. The seating chart had been made, and there it was in black and white, my name at a table tucked in the corner, labeled non-priority, a polite euphemism for we barely care you're here. The label burned like acid in my mind, though my family, oblivious or indifferent, carried on as if nothing were wrong. My parents were busy greeting relatives, their smiles fixed and flawless, their hands full of champagne glasses and forced pleasantries. My sister glowed in her pristine white gown, the center of everyone's attention, yet she barely glanced in my direction beyond a cursory nod. I clutched the gift I had spent weeks choosing, wrapped with care and thought, as if holding on to it might shield me from the sting of rejection. I had always loved my sister. I had been there for her first recital, helped her practice late into the night for school plays, and even skipped my own small celebrations to support her achievements. I had saved money, planned surprises, and poured my heart into little gestures that she, perhaps, had taken for granted. Yet here I was, sitting at a distant corner, a witness to the celebration I had dreamed of sharing, but one in which I had no part. Around me, laughter and chatter flowed like a river, but I remained on the banks, dry and untouchable. Cousins whispered to one another, glancing my way with subtle curiosity, some even smirking. Oh, they didn't even notice them sitting there. I heard a relative murmur. Another nodded in agreement. I guess they're just not very important. The words didn't sting as sharply as the weight of their glances, the casual dismissal that confirmed what the seating chart already declared. I did not belong here, not in the spotlight, not in memory of this day. I tried to join in conversations, offered polite smiles, but the exchanges were short, clipped, and superficial. Even the caterers seemed to glide past me without acknowledgement. My sister's friends clinked glasses, sharing stories, while I remained an observer always present, never seen. The irony was cruel. I had spent so much time imagining my own happiness on this day, and yet it had been carefully erased by my family's choices. The ceremony itself was a blur of vows, music, and heartfelt speeches. My eyes welled up multiple times, but I blinked them away, refusing to let my tears fall in front of the very people who had made me feel small. Every smile exchanged between my sister and her new husband, every hug and kiss, was a reminder of my exclusion. The gift in my hands suddenly felt heavier than the wrapping could contain. It was more than a present. It was love, thoughtfulness, and devotion, all bundled into a box that they had deemed unworthy of priority. By the time the reception began, I had slipped further into my own world. I watched the dancers whirl around me, the laughter ringing louder than ever, and I made a silent promise. This day might have labeled me non-priority, but I would not let it define me. I would remember this feeling, carry it with me, and one day, somehow let the weight of their disregard meet a quiet, undeniable reckoning. For now I sat, invisible yet watchful, clutching my gift like a shield and a sword, knowing deep in my heart that the story was far from over. The night of the wedding faded into a blur of lights and laughter, but the ache inside me lingered, sharper than I had anticipated. I had returned home to a quiet apartment, the echoes of the reception still rattling in my head. Every memory played like a cruel montage. The way my parents had smiled at everyone else but barely spared me a glance. How my sister had laughed and twirled with her friends, her gaze never lingering in my direction. I felt like a ghost haunting a celebration that should have been mine too. I thought of the years I had devoted to my sister, the endless evenings helping her with school projects, the weekends spent driving her to rehearsals, the small sacrifices I had made without a second thought. I remembered the nights I had stayed awake, comforting her after heartbreaks, cheering the loudest at her victories, silently ensuring she felt loved. And yet, in a single, thoughtless day, all of that had been erased, dismissed, rendered invisible. The non-priority label wasn't just a seating decision, It was a verdict, a declaration that my presence, my love, and my efforts did not matter. I replayed the whispers of the relatives over and over in my mind. "Oh, they didn't even notice them sitting there," one had said. Another had murmured, "I guess they're just not very important." Every word, every glance, had stung like a needle. It was not just embarrassment. It was betrayal, the kind that cuts deeper than cruelty, because it comes from the people who are supposed to know your worth. My heart tightened with a mix of sorrow and simmering anger. How could they disregard me so casually? How could they treat someone who had stood by their side, who had poured love into every gesture, as if I were a shadow on the wall? I sank onto the couch, clutching the unopened gift I had brought. Its ribbon felt like a reminder of my own invisibility. It had been carefully chosen, painstakingly wrapped, and filled with thought and emotion, yet to them it was inconsequential, a mere token, not worthy of attention or acknowledgement. I felt a surge of defiance bubble beneath the sadness. I had been patient, I had been loyal, and I had been overlooked. But patience could only stretch so far, and loyalty without recognition left a bitter taste. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine what could be done, not out of malice, but out of a need to reclaim dignity. I didn't want to shout or cry or confront them with tears. I wanted them to understand, quietly but unmistakably, that the person they had labeled non-priority had feelings, intentions, and a life independent of their approval. I could let them bask in the glow of their day, but I would not be diminished silently. My gift, once a symbol of love and celebration, could become the instrument of that understanding. I thought of my sister, radiant and blissfully unaware of the impact of her family's choices. She had lived her day in joy, surrounded by accolades and admiration, while I had sat in the corner, swallowed by invisibility. The contrast between our experiences fueled a storm inside me, one I could neither ignore nor dismiss. The betrayal was not a fleeting sting, it was a wound, one that demanded acknowledgement, even if I had to create it myself. Sleep eluded me. I turned the idea over and over in my mind, savoring the quiet clarity that emerged from the emotional chaos. I would not beg for recognition. I would not plead for inclusion. I would reclaim what had been dismissed, not with noise or anger, but with a calm, deliberate act that would speak louder than words. The gift which they had treated as unimportant would become my statement. By the time dawn broke, casting pale light across the apartment, the pain had transformed into resolve. I was no longer just hurt. I was determined. Their oversight had given me purpose. I would wait, I would plan, and when the moment was right, I would let the consequences unfold naturally. What they had dismissed would return not as a plea, not as a gift, but as a reminder of my worth, undeniable and unmissable. The sting of betrayal was sharp, but in that sharpness, I found strength. And with that strength came a quiet promise I would not be invisible anymore. The days after my sister's wedding were filled with a strange, heavy quiet. My family moved on, their attention consumed by photographs, gifts, and the endless recounting of perfect moments. Meanwhile, I existed in the shadows of their happiness, replaying the sting of betrayal in my mind like a persistent echo. The non-priority label they had stamped on me burned still, and each social media post, each family message boasting about the wedding's success, served as a reminder of how easily I had been overlooked. But amidst the frustration and sorrow, a thought began to crystallize. If they refused to honor me, I would honor myself. I would not dwell in bitterness, nor would I allow their oversight to diminish the effort, care, and love I had poured into my sister's gift. The gift had been more than an object. It was a symbol of devotion, of loyalty, of countless unrecognized hours spent supporting her. And now it could be the instrument of my quiet justice. I began to plan, carefully and deliberately. The idea wasn't born from malice. It was born from a desire to reclaim my dignity and to demonstrate, subtly but unmistakably, that being labeled non-priority did not define my worth. I imagined myself retrieving the gift, taking it back with calm assurance, and letting the very act speak for me. It was poetic justice, a way to turn their oversight into a silent acknowledgement of their mistake, Every detail had to be precise. I watched my sister's posts online, noting the people she interacted with, and the times she was least attentive to her messages. I feigned casual conversation, reaching out with a tone of normalcy that masked the storm of thought behind my calm expressions. My words were polite, warm, unassuming, while my mind mapped out the perfect moment for action. The gift itself became a symbol of focus. I examined it, remembering the hours spent selecting the perfect item, the care in wrapping it, the anticipation of seeing her smile when she opened it. Those feelings were mine, and no seating chart, no whispered comment, no label could take them away. I would retrieve the gift not as a confrontation, but as a declaration. This is mine, and you cannot diminish the value of my thoughtfulness or my heart. The more I thought about it, the more satisfying the idea became. I imagined my sister's confusion, my parents' surprise, and the unspoken acknowledgement of their oversight. It would be a quiet victory, one that required patience, composure, and subtlety rather than yelling or drama. I understood that true power often came in silence, in measured actions that left a lasting impression without a single word wasted. Even as I planned, I felt a sense of liberation. The anger that had simmered after the wedding began to shift, transforming into a calm confidence. I was no longer merely hurt or overlooked. I was empowered. Every detail of my plan, every calculation about timing and approach, reinforced my resolve. I was taking control of the narrative, reclaiming my agency, and refusing to be defined by the labels imposed on me by those who should have loved me unconditionally. And yet, beneath the strategy and calculated steps, there remained a tender layer of emotion. The gift was more than a tool for revenge. It was a testament to the love I still held for my sister, a reminder that even when betrayed, I could act with intention and integrity. My plan was not about punishment for its own sake. It was about reclaiming respect, dignity, and the acknowledgement that I mattered. As the days passed, the plan solidified. I knew the moment would come when I could retrieve the gift, and I would do so with a serene confidence that left no room for doubt. Their oversight would be clear, their misjudgment undeniable, and I would emerge not bitter, but strong. In my mind, the gift no longer belonged only to them. It belonged to me, and in reclaiming it, I reclaimed a piece of myself they had tried to ignore. By the time the week drew to a close, I was ready. The plan was in place, precise and unyielding. Every day I waited only sharpened my determination, and the quiet satisfaction of anticipation settled into my bones. I was no longer a silent observer of my own marginalization. I was an active participant in my own reclamation. The silent plan was no longer just an idea. It had become my quiet power, and I knew that when the moment came, the world would feel the weight of my resolve without a single word shouted. The day I had been waiting for arrived quietly, without fanfare, yet it carried the weight of months of hurt, patience, and planning. I felt a strange mixture of anticipation and serenity as I held the gift in my hands. It was still wrapped carefully, the same way I had prepared it for my sister's wedding, but now it carried a different meaning, a symbol of my strength, my dignity, and my refusal to be dismissed. I arrived at her apartment with calm confidence, my footsteps measured and deliberate. The moment I rang the doorbell, I felt the familiar rush of nerves, not from fear, but from the thrill of finally taking control. My sister opened the door, radiant as ever, completely unaware of the storm that had been brewing quietly for months. She smiled warmly, oblivious to the undercurrent of tension I carried, and invited me in. I followed her into the living room, my eyes scanning the familiar space, now filled with memories of weddings, celebrations, and shared family moments that I had longed to be a part of. I could feel her curiosity growing as I remained unusually composed, neither upset nor overly cheerful. It was this calmness, I realized, that would make the act more potent. There was no drama, no anger, just the subtle assertion of presence. Holding the gift firmly, I set it down in front of her and met her gaze with steady eyes. "I think this belongs with me now," I said softly, my voice carrying an almost imperceptible weight of finality. There was no accusation, no anger, just the quiet authority of someone who had been overlooked for too long, and had finally decided to reclaim what was rightfully theirs. For a brief moment she froze, her expression shifting from casual curiosity to shock, confusion, and then a flicker of guilt. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but no words came. The room, usually filled with chatter and laughter, felt suddenly suspended, the silence emphasizing the significance of the act. My parents' absence at that moment did not matter. The message was already clear. I had been invisible, and now, in reclaiming the gift, I was making sure it was impossible to ignore my presence any longer. As she stared at the box, I noticed the subtle tension in her shoulders, the way her smile faltered. This was the effect I had hoped for, not humiliation, but awareness. Awareness that the love, effort, and care I had poured into that gift were mine to protect, and that the disregard of a single day could not erase the truth of my value. The act itself was more powerful than any argument or confrontation could ever be. I paused, letting the silence stretch. It was a quiet victory, one that needed no cheering, no applause. I didn't want her to feel punished, only seen, only aware of what she and our family had overlooked. The gift, once a token of celebration, had become a mirror reflecting their neglect and my resilience. It was now a statement of self-respect, a quiet triumph born not from malice, but from the clarity of reclaiming what had been mine. Finally I smiled, soft and assured, and turned to leave. I hope you understand, I said gently, that being labeled non-priority doesn't define who I am, or what I give. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of every ignored effort, every overlooked moment, and every suppressed tear. Walking out, I felt lighter than I had in months. The burden of invisibility had lifted. I had not needed confrontation or anger to make my point. The quiet, deliberate reclaiming of my gift had done all the work. The sting of betrayal still lingered, but it no longer had power over me. I had taken control, turned hurt into strength, and found dignity in the most elegant form of revenge. Assertion without aggression. That day I learned something invaluable. Being overlooked by those you love can be painful, but reclaiming your worth in a calm, deliberate, and thoughtful way is far more satisfying than any act of anger. The gift had returned to me, but more importantly, my sense of self, my voice, and my dignity had been restored. In the silence of that act, I had taken back not just a box, but my place in the story of my own life.